I want to tell you about a Sunday morning. Not a dramatic Sunday. Not a Sunday with ceremony or company or the kind of external significance that you might expect to accompany a decision of the size I made that morning. A completely ordinary Sunday. Coffee, the window, the particular light that comes through east-facing glass in the early hours before the city has fully woken up. I sat at my kitchen table. And I forgave her. Without her asking. Without her knowing. Without receiving the one thing I had been waiting 12 years to receive. My name is Grace. I am 41 years old. I have a scar on my left knee from a bicycle accident when I was 9 and a scar on the left side of my heart from a friendship I lost when I was 26. A wound that I carried for 12 years, that I expected to carry for longer, and that I set down on an ordinary Sunday morning 3 years ago because I finally understood something that I had been refusing to understand. The apology was never coming. And my peace could not afford to wait for it any longer. This is the story of the friendship. Of what happened. Of the 12 years of waiting and the confrontation that changed nothing and the Sunday morning that changed everything. And of what I learned, at considerable cost, across more years than were necessary, about who forgiveness is actually for. Her name is Melissa. We met in college. The kind of meeting that happens in the first week of freshman year, before anyone has had the chance to become selective about their connections, when the world is new and overwhelming and the person who sits beside you in the dining hall on a Tuesday night and makes you laugh becomes, almost instantly, someone essential. Melissa was essential to me from that Tuesday night forward. She was sharp and funny and had the specific quality of making whatever she was paying attention to feel like the most interesting thing in the room. When she listened to you, really listened, the full attention kind, you felt genuinely that what you were saying mattered. That you mattered. It was a gift. I have not met many people who have it as naturally as she did. We were best friends for 15 years. Through college and the first apartments and the terrible jobs that paid too little and meant too much and the relationships that overlapped and diverged and the particular business of becoming actual adults in a world that had not prepared either of us as fully as we had believed. She was my maid of honor when I married Richard. I was in the front row when she defended her dissertation. We were each other's emergency contacts. The person listed first on every form that asked for one, the number in the phone that existed for the moments when the ordinary contacts were not sufficient. For 15 years, she was the person I knew I could call. And then she did something that broke all of it. I am going to tell you what she did. Not in full detail. Some of what happened involves other people whose privacy matters and whose part in this story is not mine entirely to tell. But in the shape of it. In what it meant. Melissa, in the course of an ordinary conversation with someone I barely knew, shared something I had told her in complete confidence. Something deeply personal, the kind of thing you share only with the person you trust most, in the specific context of that trust, with the understanding that it goes no further. It went further. In a way that had direct consequences for my marriage. For my relationship with Richard. For a period of our first year as a married couple that should have been different, and was not because of what Melissa had shared and the ripple effects of the sharing. When I found out, and I found out in the particular painful way of someone who had no reason to expect it, the friendship ended. Not calmly. Not with a conversation. In the raw, immediate way of someone who has discovered a betrayal from the person they least expected it from. I called her. She answered. And what she said, what she offered in response to what I had found out, was not what the moment required. What Melissa offered, in that phone call, was explanation. Not apology. She explained the context in which the sharing had happened. She explained that she had not intended the specific consequences that had followed. She explained that the person she had told was someone she had trusted and that the further sharing, the sharing that had reached me, had been beyond her control. All of which may have been true. None of which was what I needed. What I needed, what the 15 years of trust and the specific, deliberate violation of that trust required, was 2 words. 8 letters. The acknowledgement that she had done something wrong, had done it to me specifically, and that she understood the cost. I'm sorry. She did not say them. Not that day. Not in the weeks that followed, when I was still raw enough that an apology would have had the chance to begin the repair. Not in the years after, When the friendship was over and the distance had accumulated and there were no more calls to answer. Not ever. I have thought about this a great deal, about why she didn't. Not to excuse it, but because understanding it has been part of how I have arrived where I am. I think Melissa is a person who finds apology genuinely difficult. Not because she is cruel or because she did not care about what happened. I believe she cared, in her way. But because saying sorry, for some people, is the admission of having been a person capable of that particular wrong. And that admission requires a quality of self-confrontation that some people are not able to sustain. It is a limitation. A significant one. A limitation that cost me something real. But it is hers to carry, not mine to sentence her for. Pause. 5 seconds. I spent 12 years, in the space where the friendship had been, in a particular relationship with what she had done and what she had not said. Not constantly. I had a life, a marriage that recovered, a career, the full contents of a real existence that went on requiring my attention and my presence. But somewhere underneath it all, occupying a corner of me that I could not entirely vacate, was the particular residue of an unaddressed wrong. The waiting. Not active waiting. I was not sitting by the phone expecting her call. But a passive, structural waiting. The sense of something unfinished. Of a weight that could be put down if only the right thing arrived to put it down with. The right thing did not arrive. And after 12 years, I finally understood that it wasn't going to. 7 years after the friendship ended, I saw Melissa at a mutual friend's wedding. I had known she would be there. I had considered not attending, and then reconsidered, because not attending was itself a kind of allowing the situation to continue dictating my choices, and I had decided I was tired of that. So I went. The wedding was beautiful. I sat on the opposite side of the room from Melissa for most of the reception, which was easy enough in the pleasant chaos of 200 people celebrating something joyful. And then, in the hour before the evening ended, we were in the same small group. Near the bar. The kind of encounter that the geometry of a wedding reception sometimes produces regardless of intention. She looked at me. I looked at her. And something passed between us. Not warmth, exactly. But recognition. The particular recognition of two people who have a great deal of history and have not spoken in 7 years and are now standing 3 feet apart in the same room for the first time since. I said, "Hi, Melissa." She said, "Hi, Grace. You look wonderful." We talked for perhaps 4 minutes. Surface things, how we were, what we were doing, the wedding, the mutual friend whose day it was. Civil. Almost easy, in the strange way that significant silences sometimes produce a kind of false ease when they are finally broken. And then she said, "I've thought about what happened a lot." I looked at her. My heart, I will be honest about this, did something. Lifted slightly, in the particular involuntary way of hope that has not entirely abandoned its post. She said, "I want you to know that things got really complicated back then. And I know it affected you. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry about that. Not, I'm sorry for what I did. Not, I was wrong. I'm sorry about that. The construction that acknowledges the effect without accepting the cause. The apology that is shaped like an apology and contains none of the substance." I looked at her for a moment. And I said, "Thank you for saying that." And I excused myself. I sat in the car afterward for a long time. And I understood, with more clarity than the 12 years had previously provided, that this was the answer. Not a partial answer, not a step toward the real thing, this was it. This was what Melissa had to give. Not because she was incapable of more, but because this was the extent of the reckoning she had done and the extent of the reckoning she was going to do. The apology was not coming. Not in any form I could receive as the real thing. And I had a choice. 5 years after the wedding, on an ordinary Sunday morning in March, I made a decision. Not because something had happened. Not because Melissa had reached out or because any external circumstance had changed. But because I had been in therapy for a year, working on things adjacent to this, the patterns of waiting and the investments in outcomes I could not control, and I had arrived, slowly and not always comfortably, at a place where I could see the situation with a clarity I had not had before. I was 40 years old. I had been carrying this for 14 years. And the carrying was not serving me anymore. It had, perhaps, served a purpose in the early years. The particular legitimate grief of a significant betrayal requires time, and the carrying is part of that time. But 14 years of carrying is not grief anymore. It is habit. It is the weight you keep lifting because you have forgotten that putting it down is an option. I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee. And I did something I had never done with respect to Melissa and what she had done. I thought about her fully. Not as the person who had betrayed me, though she was that, but as the whole person I had known for 15 years. The Tuesday night in the dining hall. The dissertation defense. The maid of honor speech she had given that made everyone in the room cry, including me. The 15 years of showing up and knowing me and being, in the full and complicated sense, my person. And the betrayal. All of it, simultaneously. And I thought, this person is human. She has a limitation, a significant one that cost me something real. She's also a person who loved me for 15 years and who was, in ways that were also real, a genuine friend before she was someone who hurt me. And I thought, the apology is not coming. And I thought, I can continue to wait for it. Or I can decide that my peace is more valuable than the acknowledgment that would have made it easier to find. And then I did something very simple. I let it go. Not the memory. You do not let go of 14 years of a friendship by deciding to. Not the knowledge of what happened. That is mine and it is accurate and I am not going to pretend otherwise. But the weight of it. The waiting. The particular investment in an outcome that was not within my power to produce. I forgave her. In my kitchen, on a Sunday morning, with my coffee going slightly cold. Without her knowing. Without her asking. For me. Only ever for me. I want to tell you what the forgiveness gave me. Not what it gave Melissa. She does not know it happened. It gave her nothing. It was not for her. What it gave me. First. Space. The corner of me that had been occupied by the waiting became, after the Sunday morning, available for other things. Not immediately. The clearing of a long-established space takes time, and the first weeks after the forgiveness had a particular quality of emptiness where the weight had been, which was disorienting in its own way. But gradually, and then more completely, that space filled with things that were more worth the occupying. Second, a different relationship with the past. I had been holding the 14 years of the friendship in a particular way, as a story with an unresolved ending, a story I could not fully account for because the final chapter had never been written in the form I needed. The forgiveness did not write that chapter. But it allowed me to close the book. To say, this story is complete. Not resolved the way I wanted. But complete. Finished. No longer waiting for an addition that would not come. Third, something I did not expect. Compassion. Not performed compassion. Not the performed magnanimity of someone who is managing how they appear. But the real thing. I found in the weeks after the Sunday morning that I could think about Melissa with something closer to sadness than anger. Sadness for the limitation in her that had made the apology impossible. Sadness for the version of our friendship that had existed before the betrayal, which had been real and which I had genuinely loved. Sadness for the cost to both of us of something that might, with a different set of capacities on her part, have been repaired. I did not expect to feel compassion for her. But forgiveness, it turns out, is large enough to contain it. Fourth, and most importantly, I got my life back. Not the life I had before the betrayal. That is gone, and some things that are gone should not be sought. But the full presence of my current life. The ability to be where I am rather than partly in the corner where the waiting lived. The specific quality of a person who has put down something heavy and can now move more freely. I had not known how heavy it was until I set it down. That is the nature of weights carried for a very long time. You forget that you are carrying them. They become part of how you move, part of the posture of your days, indistinguishable from your ordinary way of being. And then you put them down. And you remember what walking felt like before. The karma in this story is quiet. There is no dramatic reversal for Melissa, No public exposure, no visible consequence delivered with satisfying timing. She lives her life, as far as I know, without the particular reckoning that the betrayal arguably required. That is her situation to inhabit, and I no longer have the energy or the interest to wish it otherwise. The karma is mine. The 14 years cost me something. There is no accounting of this story that removes that cost. They were 14 years in which some part of my attention was elsewhere, some portion of my peace was withheld, some corner of my life was occupied by a weight that did not earn its space. But those 14 years also did something. They made me, at 41 years old, a person who understands forgiveness not as a concept but as an experience. Who knows, from the inside, what it costs and what it gives. Who can sit with people who are waiting for their own apology that will not come and tell them, not theoretically but from the specific knowledge of someone who has done it, that the peace is available without the sorry. That is not a small thing. It is, perhaps, the most useful thing I have to offer. And I would not have it without the 14 years. Karma is not always the punishment of the person who wronged you. Sometimes it is the wisdom the wrong produced in you. And that wisdom, hard-won, genuinely earned, available now to pass on, is worth more than the sorry that never came. I want to speak to the people who are still waiting, who have a Melissa in their lives, a person who did something real, caused real damage, and has not said the words that would have made the difference, who are carrying the particular weight of an unaddressed wrong, in the corner of themselves where the waiting lives, wondering how long they will need to carry it before the person responsible does what is required. I cannot tell you that the apology will come. For some of you, it will. People grow. People find, eventually, the courage that the moment required and that they did not have at the time. Some apologies arrive late and are still worth everything. But for some of you, it will not come. And if you are in that second group, if you have already understood, in the way you understand things you do not want to understand, that the sorry is not on its way, then I want to offer you what I found on a Sunday morning in March. Your peace does not require their participation. Forgiveness is not a transaction that requires two parties. It is not something you give to the person who wronged you. It is something you give to yourself. The decision that your well-being, your freedom, your ability to move fully through your own life, is more valuable than the acknowledgment that would have made it easier. You are allowed to make that decision. Today. On any ordinary morning. With coffee going slightly cold. Without ceremony. Without them knowing. For you. Only ever for you. This has been Veravox. True voices. Real stories. Raw emotion. My name is Grace. The corner where the waiting lived is empty now. I have put something better there. End.